So I taught middle school for 12 years. And it's a profession that I think is sometimes misunderstood. And when I think about why it's misunderstood, I don't think I understood that why until this year. And the reason I think it's misunderstood is because most people's experience with a 12 or 13 or 14-year-old is as a parent. And I'll tell you right now, being a parent of a 12 or 13 or 14-year-old is a lot harder than being the teacher of a 12, 13, or 14-year-old. And so coming to that, I often get these reactions from people that are like, oh, that's great. You're a middle school teacher. And what they're really kind of saying in their eyes is, you poor sap. And so I want to tell a story that maybe gives you a sense of why I loved it and why I sometimes think about going back. About 3 years into teaching middle school, I had this group of advanced kids. And you got to be careful with kids who think of themselves as advanced because sometimes they're precocious, arrogant little assholes. And it wasn't this group, though. This group wasn't like that. And they turned out to be a great group. And I remember one day I was leaving school, and I was walking out of my portable, and I walked by the math teacher's portable, and I looked in, and there was a bunch of kids in there. And this wasn't unusual because her son was in one of my classes. And her son was in one of her classes, and him and his friends would hang out, and that seemed normal. He's waiting for a ride home. And so I go home, and I do the thing, I do the stuff I have to do, grade papers, whatever. I come back to school the next day, and I try to make it a habit to get to school about an hour before the kids get there, because it's kind of the best time to get work done. And I go out to my portable, and this is like November, it's still dark out, and I have a porch light, and I go to my portable, I open the door, and the porch light shines in just a little bit, and I look, and as I walk in, there's a plastic fork on the floor. And I'm like, okay, that makes sense. I use plastic forks for lunch, and the custodian probably just dropped it on the way out. Then I turn the lights on, and I'm not really thinking, and I look on one of the desks, and there's a plastic fork on the desk. And that's when I turn on the lights, and I look up, and all across my ceiling, taped with blue painter's tape, are plastic dinner forks, taped by the handle, hanging from the ceiling, tying down. Hundreds of them. I find out later, it took like 3 Costco boxes of plastic dinner forks to do this. There's like not an inch, more than an inch, between plastic dinner forks. And I look, and I go through, how there's stages of grief? I think there's stages of being the butt of a really good practical joke. There's like 4 of them, right? It's like just total rage. And then there's puzzlement. And then there's mirth. And then there's revenge. So I go through those stages. I go through the first 3 stages like 3 times in like 30 seconds. And I look, and there's a note hanging. And in the best impression of an 8th grader doing Monty Python, it's, you have been forked. The Knights of blank blank. And then, of course, you may be surprised by this. I was considered the scary teacher in the school. And at the bottom it said, P.S. We did not break in. We did not break anything. We did not damage anything. And if you want, we'll take all the forks down ourselves. So I sat down in my chair, and I just laughed. I couldn't help it. And I thought about it, and I'm like, what the heck? And then I realized, the math teacher. So I wait for her to get to school, and I walk to her portable, and I look in, and I look at her, and I say, did you let any kids in my room? And she looks at me with this sort of half funny, half scared look. And she says, yeah, you okay? I said, no, it's hilarious. It's great. And I said, but you need to do something for me now. I'm not going to ask you who it is. I know it's your boy. And I think I know it's this other kid. But I'm not going to ask you if there's anybody else. And she didn't say anything. To her credit, she didn't let in that there was 2 other boys involved. And I said, but here's what you need to do. I'm going to tell the kids I did it. Because the worst thing I think you can do to someone who plays a practical joke on you is not let them get credit. So I sat there and I said, I'm going to tell the kids I did it because I thought it would look cool. And I'm going to tell them I came in late that night and did it, and I was tired. So the kids start walking into my room, and the looks on their faces are precious. And they go, Mr. Waltz, what happened? I said, oh, I thought it looked cool, so I hung forks. It took me a long time, but it's okay. And I knew that this would just eat away at these kids, because if they said something, then I got them. And if they don't say anything, then I still got them. So And I found out later it's exactly the way it worked, because they would say to other teachers, I don't think Mr. Waltz did that. And the other teachers who were in on it would say, so what do you know? And they would shut up. So, so then I have these forks and the kids were, and it goes on and on. And somehow me and these kids kind of got to get simpatico, right? And other kids would complain about the forks sometimes, do this fake, scary thing, like there's forks above us or whatever. And so at one point, about 3 months later, I wrote this note. I knew who I thought it was. So I wrote them a letter, the two kids that I thought it was, who were part of it. I wrote them a letter, and I said, if you choose to take the forks down, take them down. And I did my best impression of Monty Python. Choose to take them down, but leave them over these two kids. And these were the two kids giving the worst problems about the forks. And it was a snail mail letter. I actually wrote it out, and then I folded it up, and I put it in an envelope, and I mailed it. The next day, now granted, I mailed it that night. The next day, I walk into my classroom, all the forks are gone except two above those two kids. And somehow we had communicated that way. And these kids turned out to be awesome. It turned out to be a great group. I still hear about these kids through the math teacher. And the 4 young men who were involved, great young men. You know, 3 of them went to college, 1 of them was working their way through college, 1 joined the Army, 1's studying to be a teacher. I think it was 3 years later, they forked my office on my 40th birthday, thanks to my wife. And I guess what I want to say about teaching middle school is that I got to be part of these kids' own personal little origin story, their own personal coming of age. And if there's nothing else I have in this life, somewhere down the line, when they're at like their 20th reunion, I know they'll be saying, do you remember when we forked Mr. Waltz? Thank you.